Hey, welcome Elaine Ellinger to the Biodigital Convergence Transhumanist Report. Glad to have you back for part two.
Thank
And
you very much, Tom. It's
yeah,
a pleasure to be here.
of course. Yeah, I've read your new book here. I think
Oh,
everyone can see
wonderful.
that. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's called Civilization Reckoning. And I mean, honestly, like great job, right? Like this is a great knowledge tool for any Western leader. Every one of them should be reading this.
Oh, I agree. Thank you very
Yeah.
much.
Oh yeah. Well, you've done the work. I mean, you've done the work. You're doing the work that government officials, our gatekeepers, quote unquote, are supposed to be doing to protect like their own citizens, right? And this is a real issue. You know,
Yeah,
you can't cry Islamophobia like that.
no.
It's a psychological tactic, right, to ignore like people like yourself or myself, right, that are talking
Yeah,
about Islam, right? Islam's
yeah,
becoming an issue, right, because the population's growing
yeah.
and their mosques are spreading, and we need to ask ourselves, what are they actually teaching? And you have done an excellent job
Oh,
in
thank
this
you.
book, yeah, because like it's you and there's others as well, but I mean you have a very professional, I'm going to say academic, like approach to dealing with this. And I think that, my call is that Western leaders, politicians will at least take the time to read the book so you guys actually know what's going on instead of just believing all the surface level lies, right? Let's call it
Yeah.
tequila, right?
Well,
Oh,
what I really object to, Tom, is that they pretend that they are doing this as a human rights issue, and it is the absolute opposite.
yeah,
Because according to the teachings of Islam, things like slavery is halal, and child marriage,
yeah,
all of this. How can they
yeah.
ignore all this and pretend that they are defending human rights when they advance Islam, the Sharia, that allows this? So
Yeah.
they're not being noble at all. Quite the reverse.
100%, right? And yeah, and of course, okay, you made these claims. So how do you justify these claims? Well, you've gone to the Quran, you go to
Yeah,
the Hadiths
yeah,
and the Sirah, right? Which
yes,
yeah, you go to the root cause or like the root doctrine. Let's call it
yes,
root. I
yes.
call it root cause analysis, and you get it. And see, no one can dismiss that. Like it doesn't matter, yeah, what your neighbor says. It's like you're
Mhm.
looking at the roots, and you've done
Yeah.
it the right way. So
Well, I, no one can, because I use the Islamic sources that have got the highest credibility, the absolute
yeah,
best.
sure,
So the what you find, though, really, like there are groups that are meeting with our parliamentarians, and there was one just recently, and it was ISGAP, and they're talking about the Muslim Brotherhood, and the
yeah,
cameras are rolling, and everyone's listening. Well, we have to do something about the Muslim Brotherhood, but don't dare talk about the doctrine. And what they are really saying, when they go to Parliament and they imagine that all of these people are terrible, all right, they say, there are millions of people who are involved with the Muslim Brotherhood. They might not actually be members, but they are working with them, okay? Because a lot of these people, they have a lot of influence, they have a lot of charisma, they have people who listen to them, and they're the little puppets that they get to help them. But this involves millions of people globally. Are we saying that all those people are terrible? Well, of course not. There's not that many bad people, I don't believe, in the world, but there is a doctrine that is guiding them, and you're not allowed to talk about that doctrine. So where does this all come from? Are they just born, wanting to do all of these
yeah,
things? No,
yeah,
they have a doctrine, an ideology that tells them to.
yeah,
And that is what we need to address, but they
yeah.
never want to talk about that. So we have these groups. They say, oh, we want to stop sharia, or we want to stop the Muslim Brotherhood, so look over there, it's those guys, they're bad, but don't dare talk about the doctrine. And that's where it all comes from.
100%. I mean, it's like 1 + 1 = 2, right? This is simple stuff,
Yeah.
right? I mean, okay, first and foremost, though, I'm going to read your bio, though, because I have not done that yet. So I need to get that covered.
Who is
And then
she?
yeah, we'll resume, right? So I've got you as Ellinger's interest in Islam began in 1983, to a chance encounter with a Bahai refugee who fled Iran during the revolution. At that time, Ms. Ellinger was working as a child protection social worker in Canada. Since then, she has spent many years researching, writing, and speaking about the growing influence of Sharia in non-Islamic countries from the perspective of the non-Muslim. Formerly Canadian director and senior researcher for a European think tank focused on Islamic doctrine, she founded the Perspectives on Islam Society in 2023 for the express purpose of providing public education on the primary teachings of Islam in the context of current events. Okay, good. So at least then, yeah, like people have a little bit of your background, and I mean, I'm glad you've really followed through like your interest on the subject, right? Because it's yeah, like it's we're seeing a lot of changes. Even like I'm 44 now, and the changes that I've seen in this country, especially since the Trudeau era with this mass immigration too. I mean, you see it. We're seeing it like
Oh, you
real time.
bet.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And I've got a few years on you, and I can tell you
Oh yeah,
that,
oh yeah, for sure.
1974, I
Yeah.
was working in the UK in London, and it's an entirely different city now, entirely different. And I want future generations to have the same opportunities, to have the same freedom that I had. I could wander all over Europe with no fear at all, and that's not the case anymore. And that's not fair. And frankly, our leaders are selling off our birthright. And, whether
Yeah.
it's Islamic finance or whatever, the votes that they're hoping to get, I don't know, but it is wrong what's happening here. It is wrong to give away the freedoms the future generations should enjoy.
100%. And that's exactly right because I think of you think of your children, your grandchildren,
Yeah.
and yeah, these are issues that a lot of people did not have to deal with up until now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like it's all a part, like to me, like in simplistic terms, about this global multicultural experiment, like which of
Oh,
course, yeah, like it's not working. To me,
no,
it's not
it's
working because
not.
it's a clash. Like you've got it right when you look at the doctrine, and it actually exposes and makes us remember, like, because to me, for the most part, Europe and North America, were basically forged out of the Judeo-Christian, at least traditionally. It's changed now, where we have more of like what I call the rainbow flag crusades spreading across the West, if you will, at least politically speaking. But yeah, like I mean, you really see the difference. Like in Islam, to me, they're quite united in my view, right? Even though I know they're fighting each other as well, but I
Well,
don't know.
a lot of this has been manufactured, frankly. When
Yeah, yeah,
again, when I was young, everybody got along. We had, the festivals, the I would go to like Chinese New Year or, German
yeah,
Edelweiss Club or, the Hungarian sausages and Ukrainian dinners, and everybody got along, and they would have a folk fest every year. And the folk fest would have everybody, whether you're Mexican or what the heck you are. Now, the whole thing with Islam is entirely different. It is not like any other belief system, it is exclusive. So if you want to be a citizen of Saudi Arabia, you need to be a
yeah,
Muslim. If you want to enter the city of Mecca, you need to be a Muslim. So this was created very early on with
yeah,
Muhammad. You are exclusive, you are the Ummah, and you are better than everyone else. And the
yeah.
doctrine is set up that way. But there is no other belief system that lights a candle to this. There is no other belief system that kills apostates, okay, and says it's better than everyone else. It actually finances its own military because Islam, I mean, it's been around 14 centuries. It is highly organized civilization. And people go, oh, well,
Yeah.
that's barbaric, whether it's, FGM or child marriage or whatever it is. They'll say, oh, it's barbaric. Well, to Islam's way of thinking, perspective, we are the barbarians, all right? Because
Yeah,
we went around,
yeah,
with our faces uncovered. How dare we have the sun on our face? That sort of thing. I mean, it's
absolutely.
ridiculous. So it's entirely different because it is structured as a civilization. Islam refers to itself as a deen, okay, din al haq, as the way of truth, and this all comes from Muhammad and Quran 45:18, the ordained way, the Sharia, how they must live. But they don't refer to themselves as a religion, and in fact, that is how the children are taught. Okay, so this book here, this is an Islamic school book, and on page 2, it says Islam is not a religion. Okay, it is a deen. It is a way of life, a complete civilization, and it seeks dominance.
Yeah, and I'm glad you've made those distinctions,
Yeah,
because there is
everybody
like,
else gets along fine.
yeah, well, there has been, actually, I was talking with a friend about the separation of church and state, and I don't need to get into that whole conversation yet, but but in Islam, yeah, there is none of that. It's basically like you said, it's a complete system of governance where it's
And
all
and I'm not saying that all Muslims follow all this or that all
yeah,
Muslims know all of the doctrine, because it's frankly it's taught very surreptitiously, and
yeah,
particularly in the West. And that's another whole subject. But there are all sorts of Muslims that have really never been exposed to it. They really don't know how far it goes, and if they actually look at something like Afghanistan and say, oh, what's going on there, they'll be told, oh, it's a bad government, or oh, it's the Americans
right,
did something, or whatever. But I'm sorry, this has been going on 14 centuries, and it's expanding and expanding and expanding, and the root cause is the doctrine. And
yeah.
it always ends up the same way, that a little girl is married off when she's still a baby, and that a grown woman can't have the sun on her face or share a smile. This is not acceptable.
100%. Well, it's in total contradiction to the way the Western system has been set up, and it needs to be addressed like head on. Like
Yeah.
some people are doing that. Like,
Yeah. Oh,
I know,
yeah.
yeah, there's some politicians. I know there's one in Italy and there's one in the Netherlands. Names kind of slip my mind
There's a couple
offhand,
good
but
ones in the US, I
yeah,
must say, right now.
yeah, that's
Really
right.
making an
There's
effort. Yeah.
yeah, well, they're starting to see that if nothing's done, this is going to keep growing. And I and until like the point where you're gonna find there will be a clash of civilizations once the numbers are up high enough. Because, like you said, like if you want to get into the three stages of jihad, that was one of the points, right? And maybe that's a good uh, point to jump into, of how they do it, right? Because to me, it's parasitical in nature. That's how I see it. It's they latch on, they play the
Well,
victim.
it's a tried and true method. It follows the
Yeah, it
pattern of
works.
Muhammad, and it
Yeah,
works like a charm.
yeah.
But I was just going to say about Sharia, about the people who are trying to stop this, is that the most recent bill, and there's been apparently over 200 in the last 15 years in regards to Sharia, is that it doesn't include a definition of Sharia. Like,
No,
they're
really.
going to
Okay,
leave it up to
that's
the human rights tribunals and the
no.
judges to figure out what is Sharia. Well, they'll be turned inside out in seconds, because it's a whole, this book here, it's called A Treatise on Disputation and Argument, okay? And this is Islamic disputation, and they have rules about it, all right? And there are people who absolutely get this down to a fine art. For instance, it is an ad hominem attack to say anything negative about Muhammad. It's simply not allowed. And it's
Right,
not allowed to discuss anything which is given as a truth, in that it's in the Quran. Okay, so for
right.
instance, that there can be 4 wives. Well, this is simply off the table. You cannot discuss that, because it is a
Yeah.
truth, and that is how the doctrine is presented. It is the truth, the Sharia, the way of life, and it cannot be debated.
Yeah, and it caters to, I'm going to say, the hedonism of a man more so, and the
Oh
conquering
yeah,
man. Oh, 100%. Like the more you
oh
learn
yeah.
about it, I can see, like, okay, on at a base level way of operating. Yeah, if you conquer lands in the name of Allah and Muhammad, right? Then the women can become your slaves, and I mean it's a driving force, but it's very carnal. Like I find it's very carnally
Oh yeah,
based.
and I object totally to the way they're allowing this to be taught in the
Yeah,
schools, because if it's
yeah,
going to be taught in the schools, I would prefer it was taught by a Bahai or a Coptic Christian, or somebody who
yeah,
has suffered under Islam. Many Hindus have. And
yeah,
to have basically the fox in charge of the henhouse, which is the only way to say it, because it's being
yeah.
presented as something benign, something,
Right.
peaceful, and it is not at all. And in fact, there's a recent report. There's, oh dear, what's it called? I've got it somewhere. Anyway, it's the federal employees, the Muslim federal employees. They've got the same thing in the UK. So they have put out a report about how Muslims are to be treated in the federal workforce. Well, I can tell you this is work to treat in the US. And these things are shared and exported. So something that might work here will now be shared in Australia because there's an enormous network. Well, they're saying that, they have to have the prayer rooms and they have to have, time off for prayers 3 times a day. And you mustn't expect them to, shake your hand. Okay. So we've got, segregation. We've got all of these things. Never mind that it might offend anyone else. We mustn't
Yeah.
offend anyone who pursues Islam. This is totally unacceptable. Totally unacceptable.
Yeah.
And
I don't even,
if you want to live in a civilized in an Islamic world, there are many of them. This isn't one.
100%. Well, they're trying to make it one. That's the whole thing.
That's
And
exactly
that's
what's
what you're
underway
trying
here.
to warn people.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, one thing I think we need to emphasize is the cowardice of most, it's not all, but most of our gatekeepers, like our politicians. It's like, guys, why aren't
Oh
you
yeah.
addressing
So
this?
my first, I've given up on Canada. I'm sorry to say.
Okay.
I put it out there, but I don't put any major effort. I really don't put any effort into trying to reach our politicians anymore because I've wasted years at that. I couldn't tell
Okay.
you how many hours I have spent, getting a letter just perfect to send it off to have it absolutely ignored. And when I
Yeah.
wrote my first book, which was primer, it's a very low level primer, but it ends with a few
Yeah.
recommendations and a few words about women and the Muslim Brotherhood and a few things. Okay. What the first book does, though, is that at the end, it has a synopsis of Sharia. So,
Yeah.
Sharia involves everything, basically, that comes out of the Quran or Muhammad. It's all Sharia. If with Muhammad, he said something was obligatory, then you have to do it. If it was recommended, then it's
Yeah.
good. If it went on around him and he didn't say anything about it, then it's okay. But if he didn't particularly like it, then you shouldn't do it. And if he forbid it, then you mustn't do it. Well, that is still carried on today, 14 centuries later, the example of this man. So it is imperative to have an accurate knowledge about who this man was and what he did and what is being provided. For instance, institutions we used to trust, not just our schools, but museums. There's a museum of Islam in Melbourne, Australia, and it's got a wall that's covered with a small biography of Muhammad where it says what a wonderful man he was. I think he was named Man of the Year somewhere at some time. That talks about the wife Khadija, but not the other 12. Not a spot of blood on that wall. And that is, and thousands of people every month go through and read this. And they're not being taught the truth. But when it comes to Sharia, this book here is a compendium because it's called Reliance of the Traveler. It's over 100 pages. So things that are well known are listed there. All right. And the at the beginning of the book, it's endorsed. Okay. So it's active today. All of this applies forever. All right. But at the beginning of the book, it mentions, a couple of endorsements. One of them is a fellow by the name of Alwani, and he was head of something called the International Institute of Islamic Thought. All right, and he says everything in here is great. Well, this same fellow, the Islamization of knowledge, the IIIT, the one of our professors here in Canada wrote this book, and right at the beginning of it, thanks the International Institute of Islamic Thought for their support and their financing. Now, that same person wrote the Canadian voting guide for Muslims in 2019, and that same group, the IIIT, is listed as a friend of the Muslim Brotherhood. So, if they talk about, we're going to outlaw the Muslim Brotherhood or we're going to outlaw Sharia, tell me, are they going to start arresting MPs? Are they going to start arresting professors? Well, no, they're not. And they're looking at the symptom, not the source. So it's going to fail. Of course it will. It always has.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. See, you should be. I mean, you're a professor to me on the subject, like 100%. And see, I'm about truth, wherever that
Yeah,
leads.
yeah.
I certainly don't have all the answers, and by any means, but I have an open mind, right? Like, and I know what I know, and I know what I don't know, and what I don't know is a lot. But then when I look at someone like yourself that's done the work, it's like, and the fact that you've canvassed our politicians and get no response. See, that in itself tells you that it's not about truth for them.
Well, I never finished that sentence about that book, the first
Okay.
book, at my own expense. And thank goodness the postage is covered in Canada if you're mailing to your MPs. I
Okay.
mailed 140 of the books to our MPs.
The one you
I
just
got,
wrote?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So I bought the
Okay.
books. I mailed it to them with a letter. I got two replies. Here's one of them. Okay. One
Yeah.
from a conservative, one from a liberal, just saying, oh, thank you for the book. Other than that, nothing. And no interview. And I have written so many letters, reached out to
Well,
so many of them, and they don't want to talk to me. So there's nothing I can do. But they're very happy to quickly arrange for a national summit on Islamophobia, or
of course they are.
host
Yeah.
this group a couple
Yeah.
of weeks ago where they're
Hmm.
talking about, oh, the Muslim Brotherhood, because that's safe. Let's talk about the Muslim
Yeah.
Brotherhood, those things out there, okay? Let's
Yeah.
not talk about the doctrine that creates
Yeah.
those people who, in my opinion, all right, they're cannon fodder. Like the Muslim Brotherhood is a higher level, but think about the jihadis. If they had been raised in love instead of this doctrine, their lives would have been entirely different. They wouldn't have been sacrificing their life as a jihadi in the hopes of getting to some Valhalla. It's not fair to any of them, and they are basically the grunts. They're the cannon fodder. They're
Yeah.
expendable. While okay, for a jihadi, all right, and if they're killed in the cause
Yeah.
of Allah, they're supposed
Yeah.
to go to paradise, and all of their previous sins are erased.
Erased.
But if you're sitting in Qatar and you've got millions at your disposal, part of which will have come from the zakat that all Muslims are required to pay, you can just fund a mosque and you get the same promise. You're promised a place in paradise. So why don't you build another mega mosque in Europe? It's,
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah. That's a
how
good
is
point.
this fair? You can give up your life or you can have a bunch of money. And where do you get the money? You get the money from the people who are giving up their lives.
Yeah. Like you said, that it is, they are sacrificial, like even with what's
Yeah,
going on.
you bet.
Yeah, like very much so. I mean, you've got it right. It's exactly right. You understand the complete system to me. At least I'm going to say at the physical plane of things and what's written. And it's exactly like you said. If they were raised in love, like I like the fact that you said that, because I have a friend too that would probably much agree with those statements. And yeah, if you're brought up with this kind of doctrine and these people are idolized, right? What do you think's going to happen? Like even you look at these young little jihadis in Palestine, right? I mean, that's what's pushed. That's the way, right?
And it's a point of honor. Like
Yeah,
parents
yeah,
and grandparents are
yeah,
allowed to kill their own offspring according to the Islamic doctrine with no
100%.
expiation
Yeah.
whatsoever because they belong to you. Well, and that's it goes back to
Yeah.
the Quran, and there's a story in the Quran about a young man that it was feared he was going to grow up and dishonor his family, so he was killed. Well, that was fine. It's just
Hmm.
this
Yeah.
whole thing of honor killings is enormous, and that goes along with cousin marriage. Like Sweden is trying to stop the cousin marriage now because it is so often forced, and it's because it's going to be financially or politically beneficial for the family. And yeah, that, and people are killed because they refuse to cooperate. We've had
Yeah.
instances of that in Canada and the United States where people have been killed for things like wanting to not wear a hijab.
Hmm. 100%. Yeah. I mean, the question I ask is, even to our leaders, is why have you invited these problems into our own backyard? That would be question number one for me. You've done this. These guys have done this, right? It's the guys that have opened the floodgates on mass
Yeah.
immigration, and
Oh,
you've
yeah. I
yeah.
mean, this
Why?
is
Yeah.
absolutely not how I planned on spending my retirement. Not at all. Right.
No,
I had no idea that this was going to happen. And, my interest in Islam, as you mentioned, began simply from a humanistic sort of
yeah,
perspective that, I cared about these people and I've always cared about people. I really do, and that
you
these
do. Yeah.
Bahai were killed
Yeah.
just because they were a different belief. I could hardly credit, but that,
Mhm.
it, like, really, I never heard anything like this before. And we shared a Christmas together and this story came out and it just completely blew my mind. And so I started reading biographies about other people, which is how it began, just learning about the people. And I used to see all this fighting over in the Middle East and thinking,
Yeah.
why did they kill each other like this? And
Yeah.
that eventually led me after 2001 to look at the doctrine itself, because there
Yeah.
had to be some source, and that is the source. That
That's
is most
yeah,
definitely the
you're
source.
100. That's
Yeah.
you've got it right. I mean, this is simple logic. Like,
Yeah.
to me, like, and what blows my mind is how illogical, like, Western leadership has become in their quest to globalize, like, their nations, which to me, especially when it comes to Islam, is not going to work because they will subvert our system for their own, which you can see that
Oh, of
happening.
course. Right
Yeah.
now.
I mean, it's like,
Absolutely.
guys, you see,
Islamic finance.
well,
Why are we doing this? That is now $1 trillion industry. It is supplanting
yeah,
our own. And we're facilitating that. And at the same time, this raises money for jihad. That is something people just don't understand. Now, back to, how we're facilitating this in our schools. And
mhm,
what really irritates me, is that these, people in the higher echelons go, oh, well, isn't that wonderful? And we're going to have this Islamic school or whatever. But then they're the ones that will condemn some person who is a product of that for what they have
yeah,
ultimately done. And just a few months ago, there was a young woman, police officer in the UK. And it turned out that they discovered that she had been making all of these comments online about, somebody at work had used her coffee cup. And she says, there's kufar lips all over this cup. I will never use
oh
it
yeah,
again. And of course, that's what Islam teaches, is that kufars, non-Muslims, are dirty. All right. We are Naj.
yeah,
We are dirty. And, we're not even supposed to touch a Quran. So, thank goodness we can manage that. Like, we don't realize what an opportunity we have now that previous generations have not had, because we here in the West do have access to that
we
doctrine,
do.
and that we are not utilizing that window of opportunity it's a real shame, because here's this girl, she's lost her job, she's made a spectacle of in the newspaper for saying exactly what she's been taught all her life. And the people
Yeah,
who endorse those schools and say, oh, isn't that wonderful? And, oh, Islamophobia, they're going to condemn her now. And she's going to lose her job. She's going to pay the price. And what do they pay for what they have done in allowing this to happen? They pay nothing.
no, I mean, the people, the decision makers are the actual. I call them
Yeah,
political terrorists. It's a good term for them because that's what they are. They're chameleon. I call them chameleons of the general consensus. I call them cattle managers. People don't like that when I say, but that's exactly what they are. They're cowards. They're cattle managers. They're chameleons because they don't lead based on. See, they have no moral compass. Okay, that's the way I
that's
understand
true.
it. There's nothing.
Yeah. The
Nothing.
moral compass is definitely gone now.
Yeah.
But when it comes to name calling, Tom, okay, you catch
Yeah.
more flies with honey than you do with vinegar. And if you want a politician to talk to you, you better
Yeah.
not be calling them names. So let's
Yeah. No, that's
try and
fair.
tidy that up a little bit. Okay.
Yeah. No, for sure. Right. No, and I'm like, honestly, for me, yeah, maybe I wouldn't specifically. I have a tendency that I probably would say a few of those things, right? Because I'm very upset. I don't respect them. Okay,
Yeah.
like my
No, I don't
respect
either. No.
is
A
basically
few, a
zero.
few.
Yeah,
A
and I
lot
mean,
of them definitely not. Well, look at how many of them go in, paupers, and they come out millionaires, for one thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that's not an accident either. And so the quality of people we have at the top definitely is substandard now, I would say.
Yeah. And see, and that's why, I use those words because it's to strike like these people are used to being surrounded by people that basically,
Yeah.
well, I don't know how to put this in good language, that are basically, well, I'm going to say on their knees, right? But I mean, it's like there's,
Sycophants,
okay, there's,
sycophants.
yeah, they're surrounded by yes men and yes women. And, you will never grow in that environment, ever,
No, no,
ever.
not at all. Yeah.
You're just played. And this is how you can move these people, what I call them, on the checkered board, because they're not about like an actual scientist to me is about empirical truth, right?
Oh
Empirical
yeah.
evidence. And politicians have forgotten like why they're actually there. And they don't know what they stand for anymore, Elaine. That's the problem that I have. And that's where I divide off, okay? Because I do know where I stand in terms of my moral compass. But with politicians, it's all about managing the different groups, okay? And that's why I call them, because they don't stand for anything. They stand for nothing.
Yeah.
They
So the UK, the king is supposed to be the defender of the faith. And the faith, of course, is Christianity. It's
it
Anglicanism
was,
that was
yeah,
done back around, King Henry VIII.
yeah,
Now, he's clearly not, but he is used. So, for example, he gave a little Ramadan speech where he talks about, that Allah will not test people beyond what they can stand. Right? He left off the end of that, which says that they will conquer. They will um, they will conquer the infidel and satisfy the heart of a believing people or something. I haven't got it exact in my head, but he
yeah,
left
yeah,
off the end. He left off the end that basically trashed the rest of the population brutally. Okay. He
yeah,
left that off. So he's been used like a puppet. Somebody has fed that to him. And what he doesn't even understand is that quote itself, even what he did say, is used to justify abuse. All right. That, for instance, that a woman has to wear a hijab, like Allah would not test you beyond what you can bear, or that, your hand has to be cut off because you stole something. Well, Allah won't,
yeah,
you know, like he didn't understand at all what he was saying. And we see this happening all of the time. It's
yeah.
incredible. Like they shouldn't be going there. They don't know anything about it.
No, they don't. And actually, you kind of touched on the Haddad. I call them the Haddad punishments, right?
Oh yeah.
Like
Shoot.
beheading, crucifixion, and it's all in the Quran, right?
Well,
I
it
mean,
is. And when I pointed out on X,
yeah,
boy, that went crazy. It's unfortunate that sometimes you get the biggest reaction with the thing you least expected. Like I popped that
yeah,
off at 11 o'clock at night and went to sleep and forgot about it. And I woke up in the morning and it had 159,000 things. And people were just in a rage over what I had said because I pointed out that of the graduating class at is not Trinity, Temple Bar, where they call the lawyers, to the bar,
yeah. I got you. Yeah,
that 10% of them had British names, 10%, and that more than
okay.
half of them had Islamic names. So I point this out. But my goodness, their schools and their law firms have got what do you call it when they have quotas. You have to, and this is what they're producing. Well, law should not be about quotas. And in anyway, so the thing is, how many Brits are learning about Islamic law so that they can go to Afghanistan and defend those women? Well, they're not. But we're graduating all of these people who are now working like CARE, the Council of American Islamic
Yeah,
Relations, which Florida has just declared a terrorist organization, foreign terrorist organization, and they do operate all the way around the world. So now I forget where I was going with that. Sorry.
that's okay. Like sometimes that happens. Yeah, like
Uh,
train of. Well, you have a train of thought, and let's try and rewind here a little bit.
yeah, it didn't start. It didn't start. Oh yeah, okay. The lawyers. All right. They have so many pro bono lawyers who are learning how to exploit Western law, because Western law is not designed to deal with Sharia. And it's exploited at every turn, because it's, if it's in the courtroom, it's saying, okay, this is a religious right, we can do it. If it's in the school, they're saying it's culture. They'll take the same thing, like the hijab, and they'll have a hijab day at school. Like the World Hijab Day, that was actually initiated by the imams in Pakistan, who were they were pushing back against, the women in Pakistan. The death rate of women there is just off the charts, and they were having marches. I think they called them aura marches or some such thing. And the imams there were, livid about this and said, no, we should have a World Hijab Day. And what are our schools doing? They're having World Hijab Day. They're not throwing their lot in with those poor women. They're supporting, the imams, and the imams, like in Saudi Arabia and in Iran, these people are enforcers of Sharia, and people are beheaded because of what we want to call a religious leader. It's ridiculous. It's
It
political.
is.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. 100%. And you've basically like exposed it for what it is to me very well, in a way that politicians like can respond. And that's where I really, my respect level for even the Canadian politicians has lowered even further, because to me, like, that's fine, you don't want to talk to me, that's good. It's probably not a good thing that would go both ways for a person like myself, but for you, it's like you've done it in a way that I would say is right by the system, right? And it's like, it's like, so be the judgment then, is the way I look at it, right? Because it's sort of like, here you have this people that are trying to sound the warning alarm, and yet you turn the blind eye and let you stick your head in the sand. And it's like over and over. And to me, what happens is actually like it's quite there's a science behind this, right? Because if you don't respond right to the warning, it's kind of like, I've got cancer here. We know it. We can see it. Here's this person that's exposed it, and like actually has some solutions of how we deal with it. And then you just walk away, or you ignore it. Okay.
Well, you know what I just said about, King Charles.
Yeah.
Just this past week, a man has lost his job. He's a school teacher, and there was a Muslim kid there, and I'm not sure what the Muslim kid was saying, but
Yeah.
the teacher responded with, "Well, England is a Christian country. It is still a Christian country. It's supposed to be a
Oh,
Christian
yeah.
country by law. All right, defender of the faith." And I mean, anyway, I mean, it is unique in that,
Yeah.
with King Henry and all of that. But now he's lost his job, and he's considered a threat to children. Apparently, they have opened some kind of a child abuse investigation on the poor man. I mean, it's ludicrous. It's absolutely ludicrous. Read your history book. But that
Yeah.
doesn't seem to matter anymore.
But see, this is what happens when, see, again, I'm going to emphasize the fact that I'm going to say the Judeo-Christian system, our leaders have essentially walked away from that. So like the gates are down, and like Islam is
Oh
is
yeah,
is quickly moving in.
of
It's
course,
it's
of course.
happening in a way. Yes, they're not storming the front like traditionally, like in the 16th, 17th centuries, like in arms, but it's being done in a way they know what they're doing. They know exactly what they're doing. They're telling us what they're doing. And see, the Western leadership, because they've abandoned for the most part the Judeo-Christian system, like this is why it's happened. This is why it's happening. I see it as a form of, like, in my view, of judgment, because if we don't change and come back to um like, or at least value and cherish kind of like a little bit of our traditional systems here, the whole landscape is dramatically changing very
Oh,
quickly.
absolutely.
And it
Oh yeah,
will. It
yeah.
will, because we've decided, no, in our globalist mentality here, right? It's not all of us, but that,
Well,
you know, we're going to
you,
try and
you
integrate, right, all these people. But good
well,
luck
well,
with that.
you were speaking. Well, it's the ideology that comes with them,
Yeah.
and the enforcement. Like there's some poor fellow in I don't want to lose that. Some poor fellow in Texas, and he's Muslim apparently because he's got a little shop, and I suppose he's selling pork or alcohol or something in there.
Oh, I
And
heard about
and
that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And then along comes the imam and says, well, you mustn't be doing that because Islam teaches, all right, the
Yeah.
hadiths say that if you see something wrong, meaning not Sharia, you are supposed to enforce it. And
Yep.
so he's out there with a bullhorn and protesting and getting other Muslims to come like a pack, all right, and
Yeah.
enforce this. And that is what happens with Islam over and over and over. You have people killed in the street in Islamic countries because a mob will form to enforce Sharia. And oh, we're going to enforce Sharia. Well, I'm sorry, we
Yeah.
haven't had that kind of thing here before, but we're getting it now. And when you speak about a moral compass, frankly, the West lost its moral compass
Yeah.
back in 1948 when it formed the UN, and the Islamic countries refused to adopt the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is what I'm talking about here.
Yeah.
Those human rights matter, and they refused to adopt it. And that they were allowed to be members anyway. And that it should have stopped right there. You have a what is describing itself as an organization that cares about universal human rights, and it never has. Right from the get-go, it let that slide. So now the very largest voting bloc, the wealthiest voting bloc, the most powerful voting bloc at the UN is Islamic, and it does not follow the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. But the UN doesn't tell people that the Islamic bloc, the OIC, has its own Declaration of Human Rights. It's called the Cairo Declaration, and it follows Sharia. But they don't tell you that. And yet, Canada has signed on to the UDHR. We have signed on to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and that means equality between men and women. That means freedom of
Yeah.
religion. It means all of those things that Islam denies. So Islam is not only against our charter, it is against the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and yet our politicians are promoting it with everything that they do and silencing those who oppose it. And so our major corporations, they're all lining up to get a chunk of that market. It's about commerce, it's about money
Yeah.
and
I
votes.
I I love you, Elaine. I think see, because what you speak is right. It's like it's right. It's the force in the power, right? That has the potential, right, to change the course. But it has to be chosen by the people, right? Like I respond to what you say, and of course I would stand with you any day. I don't care if we're like just me and you versus a million. I'm not changing my way
Oh, I'm not
because
changing either.
no, I know you're
No
not. Yeah,
possibility.
well, yeah, but like what you say is right. Like
Well,
it's
what's totally unfair is there are a lot of people feel it, and that's one of the reasons that I do what I do is because
yeah,
I happen to come by all of this information because I'm naturally curious and a reader. And, I had the experience early on. So, and my own experience to as a counterpoint to know how good life has been for me and how it
yeah,
is for others. So that, I feel something of an obligation to share what I've learned because people are not being taught, because they're being
yeah,
gaslit and what is being put in front of them in the schools, that they should actually believe that someone like me is to be feared. I am not to be feared, not at all. I only speak truth, and I use their own sources to do that. But that, it's that yeah, we have to speak out for as long as we possibly can. And
yeah,
the government should be helping us to do that, not hurting us.
yeah, 100%. I mean, you're doing a fantastic job, and I appreciate it. Like I'm thankful for what you do, and I'll do my part with what I gain and learn from you, and then we pass it on, right? And I don't know, for some reason I'm really fixated on I'm kind of changing topic, but the three stages of jihad, right? Because I've got it right here in your book, like phase one, when Islam is weak, it's peace, dawah, and deception. It's on page 205. And then phase two is when Islam gains strength. Or you've highlighted defensive demands start to kind of show up. And then phase three is when Islam has the upper hand, it's conquest and subjugation. And what that reminded me of was look at how they treat. If you want to know what Islam's all about, go look at a Muslim majority country And
Yeah.
how do they treat Christians?
Absolutely.
Well, right, right. That's the
Absolutely.
end result. So what do they
Well,
do in
Tucker
Saudi Arabia?
Carlson went over there recently, but you know
Oh,
what Tucker Carlson got?
yeah.
He
They're going to
got
wine and dine
financing.
him. Yeah.
It's reported that
Yeah.
he's been financed by Qatar, and that man has turned completely. And he had millions
Yeah.
of followers. And frankly, I hope that falls off a cliff. I hope it
Yeah.
does, because he's had
100%.
the red carpet rolled out for him. Somebody was probably peeling a grape for him, and he's going, "Oh, isn't this wonderful? There's no crime." Well, you know what? Are you one of those poor people, one of those minorities who might
Yeah.
just have to steal a loaf of bread one day? Do you give a damn about those people? I'm sorry I swore, but anyway,
It's fine.
it just, when people sit in
Yeah.
their ivory tower,
Yeah.
say, "Oh, isn't this wonderful?" It just absolutely infuriates me. And I just want
Yeah.
to finish with what we were
Yeah.
saying before about about trying to teach people what it really says, because people can feel it. So in the UK, you have people who haven't had the opportunity to read all of the doctrine, and
No.
but they can feel it. They know something is very, very wrong here. And when they try to express themselves, because they can't support it with doctrine like I can, they're locked up because of their frustration and their inability to say what they feel so strongly in a way
Yeah.
that the court is willing to accept. "Oh, I'm sorry, you got angry and you said this." One poor man ended up committing suicide. He was arrested at a protest. He was simply standing by the side of the road, and he ended up, they had been told, arrest a bunch of people. They did. He went to jail. He killed himself. you know
Sad.
when you look at what has happened to the UK, honest to goodness, it is heartbreaking, particularly
Yeah.
for the real patriots, the people who love the country and love the people, and they're the ones that are suffering the most. It's totally unfair. But back to jihad.
Yeah. 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 No,
Three
it's
stages.
oh, I mean, yeah, we're covering a lot of the points, right?
Well, I
It's
was just
all kind.
thinking, that there were 15 points. Okay, let's see
Well,
how many of those have we hit, because they're sure
we've
not in
covered.
order.
It's okay. It doesn't have to be
So
in order.
throw away the
It's
list.
yeah. It's this is fine. It's just there to kind of if anything that pops out at me that we haven't discussed, I'll just bring it up. That's all. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So the three stages, yes, and it repeats exactly what Muhammad did. Okay, and I just wanted to make one other point I was going to make earlier,
Yeah.
about how important the hijab is. Oh my, we must have the hijab. Well, I'm sorry, for the first 13 years that Muhammad was in Mecca, there was no hijab. There wasn't at all. And they talk about how, he did all these wonderful things for women. What wonderful
No, he
things did he
didn't.
do for
Yeah.
women? His first wife, Khadija, for 25 years, controlled the finances. She was a wealthy widow. She hired him. All right. She didn't wear any hijab, I can tell you. She was his protector. And when she died, that's when he married the little 6-year-old Aisha, and
Yeah.
another woman by the name of Sada, because I guess he needed to be looked after, frankly. So, and his uncle died. So then he migrated to Medina. It wasn't for another 5 years that the hijab was introduced, but the jihad was introduced almost immediately. So you have people who go to court or a human rights tribunal and say, "I have a right to wear a beard." That happened with a fellow. He was boxing, and you were allowed to get an exemption, but you had to apply for each one. Well, he didn't want to do that. He had several fights in one day, and he just wanted a pass for all of them. And they said no. So, of course, he fights that. He's fighting for a beard that is not even mentioned in the Quran. Well, jihad is many, many, many times. So are we going to say, well, gee, it's their, religious right to go ahead and kill us, plus FGM, plus whatever? If the religious right, if that's the only qualifier, what kind of sense is that? Our own beliefs, our constitution, or our charter, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, that should be the bar. That has to be the bar, not the fact that their religion says that they should be able to do something. For instance, they're demanding things at the workplace that slowly but surely Islamizes the workplace. More and more things are being demanded.
Yeah.
And the lawyers from Council of American Islamic Relations, these pro bono lawyers, will act on their behalf, and they have an app that you can just let CARE know right now, and they will provide a lawyer for you. Well,
Yeah.
most employers
Yeah.
don't have an app so that they can get a lawyer for free, and neither did their co-workers. But they can do all of this, and then they go to court and say, well, this is my right, but they're not asking to be stoned, are they? So it's very pick and choose. What it does is it Islamizes the country, and it's done in stages. And first, the first stage, okay, is where, the mosque is established. It always begins with the mosque. And then the infrastructure, the necessary infrastructure, and then more and more people come. And then they start making these demands for enforcement of Sharia, which is required. Okay, you should enforce it by your hand, and if not by your hand, then by your voice, and if not by your voice, then in your heart, and that is the least of faith. So they're supposed to enforce it. And when they do this, they start, saying, oh, well, we need to have halal food at school, or we need to have a prayer room at work, or we need to have things. That's when the demands start. But once they gain control, for instance, if you read about the Arab conquests, Hugh Kennedy wrote a very good book about that. As they spread across the Middle East, it only took a couple of decades to actually grab the power. It took much, much longer to convert the population, because it is so very uncomfortable to be a minority in a country where the power is held by Islam, like Pakistan. In 1948, it's like 25% of that country was not Islamic. But in 1971, Maududi influenced the president there to introduce, and he's from Jamaat-e-Islami, to introduce the Islamic finance. That's a really big one. The Islamic finance, and eventually everything was Islamized. And we're doing that here. Now only 4% of the population in Pakistan is not Muslim. It's so uncomfortable to be a non-Muslim in an Islamic country where they have the power.
Well, you're a dhimmi, right? Or they call it dhimmi. Dhimmi is the word, right? Like you're basically
that comes about. Yes, you're treated unfairly, and humiliation with that. It's not just a matter of paying the jizya, but also be humiliated.
Yeah, 100%, right? It's an apartheid system, actually, when they're in full power. When they're in full power.
Absolutely,
of course,
yes.
Right now, they're the victim in the West. They're always the victim. And that's important to understand. They are playing the victim card.
Yeah.
100%.
Which is just what Muhammad did. So, to carry on with the 3 stages. So it's a pattern that was established, and that is what's been followed, is that he migrated to Mecca when he lost his wife Khadija and his uncle, and they'd been his protectors because he had been very nasty in Mecca. And people go, oh, well, the poor guy, he was persecuted. Excuse me, he was persecuting the Meccans. You need to follow me. And right from the very earliest days, okay, actually, I have a quote here somewhere about that, well, I'll find it later. Anyway, is that from the very earliest days, before he even went public, he said that he was going to, and this is in Tabari, that he was going to conquer Persia and Rome. That, it's like from the very earliest days, but imagine that he would be able to do that as a prophet. But the Quran also says that it's not for a prophet to take captives until he has made a great slaughter in the land. What kind of a prophet is this? Like, wake up, politicians. That's not the kind of prophet that you're expecting, is it? So he was, cursing their ancestors and his own relatives. Like, he had an uncle who wouldn't follow him, and Quran 109 is all about his own personal uncle. So, if you look at like the Bible, the Torah, there's, multiple speakers, there's writers. It's not just, one. But for Islam, the entire Quran was uttered out of his mouth. It's supposed to have come from the angel Gabriel. But when you look at who actually said it, well, it was Muhammad. And what is the hadith? That's Muhammad. What is the life of Muhammad? The Sirah, that's Muhammad. It's all Muhammad. So what he did is critically important. And when you see it whitewashed on the wall of a museum in Melbourne, and you understand this is being taught to innocent Westerners and Muslims who really don't know, like in Nigeria, it's estimated there's 70,000 Christians that have been killed in the last 20 years there. 70,000, all right? Yeah. And this is northern Nigeria. You don't hear anything about that. And there are some Muslims that are kidnapped and killed as well. They're not supposed to enslave Muslims. Muslims are not supposed to enslave Muslims at all. But there have been some, and those are the ones that were not devout enough. Okay, they didn't want to go kill just Christians, right? And so, nominal Muslims in the West, who are enjoying all the benefits of living in a free society and still enjoying the camaraderie of the Ummah, but, it's not being forced on them yet. They aren't really seeing the writing on the wall either, because at some point down the road, if they don't fall in line, they're going to be the ones who are being cursed. And so anyway, he curses his uncle and his aunt in Quran 109, although it's supposed to be Allah that's cursing his aunt and uncle, but that he was, intolerable. He was insufferable. And if you just look at the demands that are being made on Western society right now and imagine that in Mecca, well, they weren't very happy with him, only they weren't politically correct and they were pushing back and saying, we don't like this. So after his protectors died, he migrated to Medina, and he immediately, built the mosque, and which was, used for armaments and political purposes. And so he built the mosque, and then he established something called the Charter of Medina. And that is actually held up today as being a wonderful example of how Muslims got along, Muhammad got along, the Ummah got along with diverse communities. Well, it's not at all. There's no indication that that charter did anything at all to help the other people of Medina. What it did do is consolidate the Ummah, okay, that they are one people, like an enormous tribe. But within 5 years, every Jew had been either exiled or executed. Some charter, they were all dead or gone. And then he pursued them outside of that. So he goes to Khaybar. And just like now, where you have a weak society that frankly is fracturing and has lost its moral compass, it's an
Yeah.
easy target. He
Yeah, it
showed
is.
up at Khaybar in the wee hours of the morning when those people weren't expecting anything. And they come out with their spades to go to work. And what happens? They're attacked by Muhammad shouting, Allahu Akbar. So these are,
Yeah.
there's an old Indian saying, I think it might be Sioux, and they say, let my enemy be strong and brave so that I will not be ashamed. Well, that is not how it is with Islam. Look at what happened there to the youth who were at that music festival in Israel and attacked, unarmed. I mean, how can anyone be proud of killing people who are unarmed like that? And our countries, our politicians, they only recognize, and I say this in the book, they only recognize war when it is declared by a nation state. Well, read the doctrine and understand the doctrine itself is that declaration against
Yeah,
all who do not follow it.
exactly. 100. Yeah, that's perfectly said. 100%. Right. Like the Ummah have actually declared war on us. It's very clear in the Quran.
The
Yeah, it says
doctrine
that.
does. Yep,
Yeah.
the doctrine does. And they're obliged to follow it. They are obliged.
Yeah. one hundred
And the
percent.
stronger it gets, the more obliged
Yeah.
they are.
Well,
So,
okay. No, go ahead. Yeah.
one lovely man I was speaking to, he was in Bangladesh, and he was only 5 years old. Now, he came from a highly respected family. They had been in that area for generations. But after the partition, it became more and more uncomfortable. And eventually they left the city and moved up to the mountains. And it became more and more uncomfortable to be non-Muslim in Bangladesh. And, it flares up periodically very, very badly. And when he was 5 years old, the temples are attacked and their celebrations are attacked, just like Christmas celebrations are attacked now. All right. Because it's haram. Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't want to get off track again. Anyway, he's only 5 years old, and his grandfather is trying to get them out of the country bit by bit, a couple at a time, because if they all go at once, they're going to be stopped. And there was only he and his sister left. And in the middle of the night, a mob appeared, dragged his 16-year-old sister out of the house while he hid in the closet. And in the morning, his grandfather found him there, and they've never seen the sister again. She's gone, 16 years old. And this is what happened. So this is stage 3. So they're experiencing stage 3 now. And and it rises and falls. Like I said, it took hundreds of years before the entire population has been converted because it's so very difficult to live in that
Yeah.
kind of circumstance.
Unless like right now, the West can say, you know what? We're done with you. And see, it's like some leaders have started to say that you're either going to integrate into our culture, but they're going to lie to you, right? This is the problem. See, this is why people need to read your book because the only thing like these Islamists, this is getting into, well, Islam, is a direct, like, we've had enough. That's what needs to be said. And it's sort of like you can go back to your Islamic world because you're not going to create an Islamic world in our own backyard. And that's what needs to be directly said. And like it needs to be done in a way that like see, I actually think Islam is going to destroy freedom of religion. That's my prediction. Okay.
Of
But like,
course,
yeah,
of
it's going to
course,
be because of them. It'll be because of them. Because it's going to force
of it,
lead,
of it,
yeah,
of it.
yeah, like that's what I think is going to happen. But like, and
Yeah.
I'm fed up with them, right?
To
Yeah.
me, Islam is an entity. It is a juggernaut, and it chews up and
Yeah.
spits out people, Muslims as
Yeah.
well. And
Well,
because its will must be done, all right, and its
yeah,
will
well,
is embodied in the Quran, Allah, and Muhammad, and that is what its will is. And people should know what that will is, and not be
yeah.
given some cotton candy version of it. And it is wrong. The way it is being taught is not, frankly, legal. It has to be taught neutrally or not at all. And they do not present a balanced view in our schools. They're
Oh,
not
yeah.
doing it. It shouldn't be allowed. It shouldn't be Muslims who are overseeing this. No, it should be people who oppose
Yeah.
Islam unless you want to be Islamized. I mean, it's
Yeah,
very
exactly.
simple. Unless you
Yeah,
want an Islamic
it is.
society, then it should be vetted by people who oppose Islam. We do
Yeah.
not want an Islamic society. We'll let it be taught, but it must be taught by people who oppose it. That's
That's a good
essential.
I that's an excellent way of proposing like change too. Yeah. Yeah, like this is what it's actually about. But okay, let's hit on Sharia councils established because that was one of our points. So just talk to us a little bit about like there's actual councils like in the West that have been established. Is that
Oh yes, and they've
okay?
been
Just so we know.
operating. I might have something here, because I did.
Yeah, that's a good one because I don't think a lot of people even realize that that's the case now that we've talked about Sharia a little bit, and that's Islamic law,
Yeah.
basically.
So Sharia is is in the Quran. The exact word Sharia is used once, and that's in Quran 45:18. And it says, "We have put you, O Muhammad, on the ordained way. So follow it and do not follow those who do not understand." The ordained way is Sharia. So it's everything. It's everything. Everything that's in the Quran that Muhammad did, it's all Sharia. However, to figure out exactly what part of the Quran or what part of the Hadith applies, they have jurists and they'll go through the Quran and they'll say, well, it's this and this and this. And they'll go through the Hadith and they'll say it's this and this and this. And this is the decision. This is how that should be implemented, right? Your average person isn't um, isn't informed enough to be able to do that. And then they'll also go to things like the tafsir, and these are respected commentaries. I always use Ibn Kathir that explain what a particular Quran verse might mean if it's not perfectly clear. For instance, Quran 5:33 talks about making war against Allah. Well, what is making war? And making war includes disbelief. All right. So you are
Yeah,
making war against Islam if you refuse to accept it. So
yeah.
but also blocking roads is considered making war. Just
Well, they're doing that all the time, right? I mean, it's
Mhm.
just like a regular occurrence. I would have shut that down. Like,
Exactly. Well, it
yeah,
should have
it's
been.
yeah, yeah, it's enough. People have
Yeah.
had enough of this stuff too. It's like why are like to me, go back to your own land and protest there about these things, not here.
I've got to dash here and grab a glass of water if you don't mind.
Okay.
It'll just
Yeah,
take
yeah,
me.
no worries. Yeah, no worries. little bit of 30-second intermission.
Yeah,
Yeah, well,
very handy to have a chat so close by.
oh
There we
yeah,
go. All
no, it's
right.
fine. We've been talking for a while, but I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
the
So
basic.
back to the councils though.
Okay,
So right off the bat, that never should have been allowed because they're following Sharia. So
is
you
that in
tell
Canada?
me why some Muslim, well, they're everywhere now because they function under what's called the Arbitration Act. So if people decide things amongst themselves, and this was really pushed a few years ago, rather than go to court, you have arbitration. But they're following Sharia. Well, if you have some woman who gets, a fraction of an inheritance. So
Yeah,
for example, if you've got four wives, they're entitled to a quarter of the estate. The husband dies, they're
right.
entitled to a quarter, and they've got to split that four ways. But if there's a child, they're entitled to 1/8, and that is split four ways. So that
Yeah,
a woman is not allowed to ask for a divorce. Her testimony is worth half that of a man. This has been going on in these Sharia councils. Well, the EU came out a few years ago with a report and said, look, they're not being treated fairly, right? Well,
oh, no kidding. Yeah, yeah,
no, they're
yeah,
not. What difference does it make? It's
yeah,
made no difference at all. None of it makes any
yeah.
difference. It follows Sharia. And according to the Quran, that the Sharia, okay, that is the highest law. It's higher than the law of the land.
Yeah. I mean, it exactly. And like, do you think there's a lot of Muslim men? I'm not sure, like that actually have four wives, like in Canada or the US. You think this
Well, there's
is?
no way to know because this is,
I
our
guess
welfare
it's
systems are exploited. And
okay.
I was just watching one the other day, and there's a fellow that, it is known to him, and
Oh, yeah,
he's got a wife in every house, and he's doing nothing but breed children. And I mean, he's
yeah,
got like dozens of children. And of course, Muhammad also said that, that
yeah.
he would
You
brag to
blew them
the other
out.
prophets, because there are so many of them. This is the goal: marry a woman who is loving and fertile, so that I can
Yeah.
brag to the others about how many
See,
followers I have.
all this needs to be addressed, right? And to me, it's like it's very simple. It's like there needs to be legislation created specifically against Islam, very specifically, that if you are going to come here, like
That isn't necessary. That isn't necessary. When you legislate against something, um,
yeah,
then now you're the oppressor, and it's really not necessary to do that at all. And that doesn't educate people. And if people don't understand why you are saying no to something, they're going to push back. And I'll tell you who'll probably push back the hardest. The Christians and the Jews will be out there fighting like crazy for poor Islam because they don't know anything about it. All right. It's
well, like I see. Well, you have to be very specific with the wording that you use, right? I mean, it's kind of like, okay, this is getting into a little bit. Well, how to arrest and reverse the
Well, I
Islamization of the
would love
West?
to get to that. So that would be a great way
That's
to close this. So you let me know when you want to get to that.
okay. Yeah, no, for sure. Well, the only other things was just kind of distinguishing between Islam versus Islamism. That's one thing we didn't really
Yeah.
hit on.
Why
And
don't I just
dualism.
go through? I got a little checklist here of the
Okay.
things that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
No,
so
no,
we
go
have
ahead.
Islam versus Islamism. Well, you've got Catholicism, you've got Buddhism, but when you say Islamism, now suddenly that's supposed to be some extremist.
Some
Well,
yeah,
it's not at all. I mean, the jihadis and the imams use the exact same doctrine. There is only one doctrine. There is no
yeah.
Islamism. There is no Islamist. And in, I guess last year, 2025, pretty sure it was 2025, there
Okay.
was a report out of the UK, and I've got that there somewhere. There's a report out of the UK. I forget the name of it. And they decided they were actually going to look at ideology. Well, isn't that wonderful? So they looked at the ideology and they said, these are the books that these jihadis, and by far they were the largest number of terror attacks. Well,
Yeah.
Muhammad said, I've been made successful by terror, so why wouldn't they be
Yeah.
the largest number? Anyway, so the largest number. So he looks at the books that they're reading, and they're reading books that are typical of the Muslim Brotherhood. All of those books are based on the Quran and Hadith. When you read them, and I have, okay, it's like reading the Quran and Hadith. They pick out some of the verses because what we've not addressed here is that Islam is dualistic. So when it first comes into Mecca, when it's in Mecca and it first arrives in Medina, you get the softer verses, but they are abrogated by the later verses, which the Quran says itself, 2:106. If I forget a verse, basically I'll come back with one that's equal to it or better. So the last verses, and in fact, Ibn Kathir says basically Quran 9:5, which is called the sword verse, abrogates the rest of them because it developed and the Sharia developed as he changed because he adopted jihad shortly after arriving in Medina, which was called Yathrib at the time. And he started raiding the caravans because he feels justified. I've been harmed, and you have to hate your victim, don't you? It makes it much easier. And it came down from the Quran. It was not you who threw, it was Allah who threw. So even when you attack these other people, you are not to blame for this because you're just carrying out Allah's will. Well,
Yeah.
they actually attacked, or they were trying to attack a caravan that was heavily guarded during what are referred to as the holy months. Okay. And then later there was a revelation that it was all right to do this because disbelief is worse than attacking on a holy day, holy month. And yet you'll have Muslims today who say, well, there's holy months and there's no attacks, so there's no jihad, it's a holy month. I'm sorry, there are. And it began with Muhammad. It was a holy month and they attacked, right? But
Mhm.
but anyway, so where were we? We were talking about Islamism. Yeah. Okay. So there is no difference. There is
Yeah.
no. It's
It's the
what
same.
the doctrine teaches, and it's like how much of it do you follow? And when it first begins, you always get the softer verses. And I have an example. There's an imam, and he was in Austria, and he began by saying, "We we we teach like what the doctrine says, and we follow the example of Muhammad." And so it comes across as being just like with King Charles, as something being very gentle and benign. But when you follow the example of Muhammad, you start out gentle and benign, and you do not stay that way. So
Right.
anyway, so that's it. There's no difference, and I
Okay.
I don't use the term Islamism.
Yeah.
It's used as insurance by their major counter-terrorist organizations, and I'm not going to name them, but they actually defined religion, Islam, as a 14th century religion with many sects, which is true. Many sects, they
Yeah.
kill each other because they're not the right sect, but anyway, many sects, etc. And that Islamism is 100-year old political movement, more or less. That is absolutely wrong. That is absolutely wrong. It is, they say this so that they can target something over there and still get the support of the Muslim community. And they do. They do, of course. They're going to
Yeah.
get support for that because they're telling you to look over there when the problem is over here.
Yeah. I mean, I think you really understand all facets of what's going on when it comes to, yeah, the
So,
Islamization
it really appalls
process.
me when they do that.
Yeah.
And, I did a post on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago, and it was about the Christians being killed in Nigeria.
Yeah.
And I included some of the doctrine. And you know who attacked me? A Canadian counterterrorist, who, by the
Really?
way, is highly fated. I pointed this out to another counterterrorist I'm connected to, who said, he's a great guy, a wonderful Canadian. I'm sorry, I blocked him because he came out, he called me a crusader and a liar. Now, I'm quoting his own doctrine. That's what I wrote there, his own doctrine. He's calling me a crusader, which is basically trying to, well, anyway. So this person came out strongly defending Islam when I'm posting about the Christians being killed in Nigeria. So this is not somebody who is defending the Canadian Charter. This is somebody who is defending Islam.
Sure.
There were
Yeah.
two more came up in the same week. and one of them was in the UK, UK counterterrorist, and they're you know they're defending Islam everywhere, and
Yeah.
it's like
Well,
with the federal the Canadian Federal Muslim Association, and they're telling you if you want to know about Islam, ask a Muslim. Well, don't. I'm sorry. Take a opposing
yeah.
view unless you want to be Islamized. That's all there is to it. And think of the
Well,
future of your children, for heaven's
yeah.
sakes.
Okay, let's set the record straight. Now, if we're going to talk about counter terrorists, I'm going
Oh,
to say, Elaine, you are a counter terrorist, and I would actually call myself a counter terrorist. And and I could substantiate that based on the fact that you've done your homework, and yes, you are quoting their own doctrine, and you've compiled it in a way that actually really exposes the whole civilization jihad that's taken place all over the West, and it's like you people can say whatever they want, but to me, like you need to form your conclusion based on evidence. That's
well,
how.
our counter terrorists, I would say, frankly, are completely infiltrated.
Yeah,
There was
It's
one
Canada. Yeah, of
was
course
going to
they are.
do a podcast with me,
Yeah,
and when he found out I sent him a note, and this is years ago. And I
yeah.
said, I'd like to talk about the doctrine. He canceled the podcast, canceled it. And it's like, I wrote
Yeah,
to
wiring.
the Canadian Revenue Agency years ago to point out zakat. We really should touch on zakat and how that finances jihad. And I don't know if they did anything with it, but then, we have our own MPs who are, angry at Canada Revenue when it investigates Islamic organizations that are
Why?
financing jihad.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what's the problem here? It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, are we not a government? Like, why do you always like give special like concession to Islam? They shouldn't have it. They should be treated exactly the same way that everyone else is
Well,
treated.
I'll just say that chasing jihadis, okay, guarantees job security for counter-terrorists, and it is never going to address the problem.
Oh, okay, okay, that's fair. Yeah, but you have addressed the problem. So like, and I love that, right? And to me, like in my world, I would appoint you as basically the implementer of how we're going to change the West. That's where you should be placed, especially in Canada right now. But we do kind of need to wrap
What
it up. But I want to
Yeah,
wrap it up with
what
yeah,
I'd like to do is show that slide about
yeah,
zakat, because I've referred to
okay,
it several times, so people need to understand how that
yes,
works. So I'm just, well, actually, there we go, right there. All right. So I'll just put a current slide there so you can see it.
yeah.
Ew, that's not working. Hold it.
Take your time.
Slideshow. Um, sorry, dear. I've done
That's okay.
something wrong here. Okay, so I'm out of that, and now I'll go back to where I was there. There. Okay, I'm gonna try this again. Slide current. There we go. Sorry, got it.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah,
Okay.
just
I'm way above my pay grade, I tell you, when it comes to technology. You wouldn't believe some of the
it's
stuff I'm
we
doing.
all got to learn. Yeah, it's if you don't use it
Holy.
a lot, there you go.
So this is from that book I showed earlier, Reliance of the Traveler. Now, there's 8 categories. So how our federal Muslim employee report is describing it, all right, is that it's almsgiving, that there are 5 pillars of Islam, and one of them is almsgiving. So let me tell you what happens to those alms, all right?
Hmm.
There are 8 categories. The 7th category is those fighting for Allah, meaning people engaged in Islamic military operations for whom no salary has been allotted. Volunteers for jihad without remuneration. That is the 7th category.
Yeah,
Okay, I'm not making this up.
no, I
Is
believe. I mean, yeah, makes
that is
sense.
obligatory for every free Muslim, but also the corporations, also the Islamic finance, $1 trillion operation now. And it all provides zakat, 2.5% of like the annual assets or income. They figure it out. Anyway, that's another story. But anyway, it's a heck of a lot of money. We're talking billions of dollars. So anyway, and some of it is being used for waqf, and that is to buy properties, which now includes uh, investment vehicles with, they have green walks with the World Economic Forum and the UN. I kid you not. Waqfs. These are properties and now investment vehicles, and they could even be a shopping mall that are dedicated to Allah in perpetuity. And it is basically a change in sovereignty. So Hamas is declaring that all of Israel is a waqf. Well, these waqf properties, Muslims are being encouraged to invest in these waqf properties. And how many of them even really understand that this could, like in India, there was an entire village that discovered that it was being claimed as a waqf, including their temple. And they're saying, no, 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 this all belongs to Allah. So why are we allowing these waqfs to go ahead, let alone the UN and the World Economic Forum now involved in them? But anyway, because it generates all of this money. And let's get to the next one. So here you have the money, the zakat. That's the 2.5%. I'm just trying to make this smaller, get it out of my way. Okay. So this is the 2.5% taxation. And once again, I'll say that Islam is not barbaric. It is a highly organized civilization that's been around for 14 centuries. It is just different. It considers us barbaric. It has this system of taxation, right? So when you look at your tax bill and you look at modern civil equivalent, so you're paying for the fire department or something. So Quran 960 is where this comes from, and you will find it in today's Islamic accounting manuals, exactly like this. That has to go to these 8 categories. One of them is for the poor and the needy. Okay, so social services, emergency relief, public service, those employed to collect it, bringing hearts together. Okay, this is like Dawa, which we didn't get to, but it's another subject. This is like Ministry of Public Information and Propaganda, freeing captives for those in debt, financial services, but also the cause of Allah, fi sabilillah, military, can include activist groups. And so, is it any wonder? So Muhammad said, I've been made victorious with terror. And here we have the terror groups. Well, how are they funded? Well, they're funded through zakat. Of course they are. They're constantly finding this. They've just discovered in the States, in Minnesota, millions of dollars going to Somalia, and for that purpose. So here is a fatwa that came out in this past year in regards to Israel. And this fatwa was signed by over 500 imams and Islamic scholars, okay? And they're pointing out exactly what the doctrine says, that it is a religious obligation to prepare a force, and that calling for so people who are wanting to have peace talks and say, no, we shouldn't have this fighting, calling for the disarmament of the mujahideen, that's the jihadis, and depriving them of their means of defense constitutes treason against God, his prophet, and the believers. All right. This book I showed you earlier, what Reliance of the Traveler, that jihad means to war against non-Muslims. And so here is the National Canadian Council of Muslims, and they are authorized to collect zakat under that category. And they use it for editorial coverage, legal support, guidebooks, letter writing, etc., and lawsuits to fight our government. So now there was one. Okay, so that's those guys. That's the Muslim Federal Employees Network, and telling managers how they need to behave. Now, just imagine if, we had Native groups saying, well, we need these things, and Catholics saying we need these things, and we're all, the system would collapse in 5 minutes. You cannot be accommodating all of these. So this is how it works. So you have the migration, then you have the demand for halal, then you have the certification. So we have all of these huge corporations, okay, jumping on board and building facilities, some of them in the Middle East, that are exclusively for halal production. So that the glue, the transport, everything, the label, all halal, all the way. Well, this is far and above what was ever said in the Quran about, not eating pork. So now unbelievers, these corporations are paying for the certification. Well, that raises money. Then we got the production, then we've got sales. Well, they're paying for that too. They're contributing to the profits and assets that deliver the zakat that causes the jihad. And I also want to point out these corporations are everywhere and including publishing. So, we're getting all of these books that are promoting Islam and saying how absolutely wonderful it is. And there's no censorship of these. Okay. There's no oversight. And I have some of them, and there's lies in there, like just incredible. I can completely dismantle in 2 minutes, but this is all being pushed out there. And in the meantime, they're delisting books that are incredibly well, meticulously researched. For instance,
Yeah.
so, this is about the grooming gangs. This was first published in 2014. It was delisted in 2019. And then the politicians pretend that they're surprised in 2025 that they don't know anything about the grooming gangs. Well, how are you going to know if you delist it? This man here, Dr. Andrew Boston, he's an incredible professor. This book is so meticulously researched, but it's been delisted after several years. It's incredible. And meantime, this is what they're doing with our children at schools. This is Italy. What are they doing? So I'll just I'll kind of get out of there. I don't want to go through all of that, but what I want to do, if you don't mind, because I think we're kind of near the end, can I just skip down to, here we go. There it is. Is that going to show now?
Oh, we still got oh, there we go. Well, it's your main screen.
Yeah, hold it. I got to get all good grief. That's not. Hello.
Yeah, it's okay. I mean,
So peekaboo here. I'm trying to get to. It won't let me jump from one slide to another. So this is a beautiful picture, isn't it? Just
yeah, it is. Yeah, that's
look at that
okay.
for
Yeah,
a moment. Okay, so from current slide, there it is.
you found it. Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, no
So
worries.
this is what I'd like to talk about now. This is at the end of the book, and there's one for
Okay.
4 countries. There's one for Canada, the US, the UK, and France.
Yeah.
And I actually have this worked out for 8 different countries. Now I've done it with the assistance of AI, and how to an act to protect the integrity of religious freedom through lawful qualification standards. Because you see, that is the problem right now. And I'm just going to stop share and I'm going to talk about this for a minute. So can you keep that in mind? Freedom of religion, integrity.
Yeah.
Act. So we're not
got it on.
we're not against anything. We're just saying that there needs to be some thresholds. So now I'm just going to
That's on page 395 in your book. Actually, it's the Canada one. Yeah.
So here's the thing. Our charter protects freedom of thought, freedom of belief, and freedom of worship. It does not require the government to legally recognize every belief system as a religion. So the way this came to me, the reason I understood how this could work is because when I was working as a child protection social worker, I had one of the acts I had to administer, and I had to administer a lot of them, was the Child Paternity and Support Act. And there is a vast difference between a legal father and a biological father. So that was really brought home to me one day with a biological father, a very nice man, and his daughter suddenly disappeared. The mother, he hadn't married her, so he was only biological, had gone to Alberta, and there was absolutely nothing I could do to help this man find his daughter because, he wasn't the legal father. He's still the father, all right, but he wasn't the legal father. So there's a big difference. And right now, our government is not required to legally recognize every belief system as a religion. And what it does guarantee is freedom of religion, freedom of belief, and private belief is absolute, but legal recognition is not. So this act is to regulate the state's definition, not anyone's private belief. So our courts already routinely set thresholds as to whether an organization qualifies for as a religion or as a charity or as a culture or for purposes like tax, like taxation and things like that. It already does all this. And the Supreme Court has already said that the state is not required, this is Canada, to accept a claimant's characterization of their practice. So Parliament does already draw lines, and it needs to draw more lines. So what the proposal says is that any belief system to be recognized legally as a religion must be consistent with, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which Canada has already signed on to. Canada is bound to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and our own charter. So we are simply setting a threshold that to be legally recognized, a religion must be consistent with human equality, freedom of religion, consistent with universal human rights, and not advocating parallel legal systems or imposing discriminatory obligations on others. So that what it does is it implements existing commitments, because we're seeing that a lot. There are laws that are being flouted, all right, and nothing is being done about it. So we already have a charter that say freedom of religion is okay. Islam says it is not. All right.
Yeah,
We
that's
need
right.
to support our charter and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Now, Islamic teaching breaches pretty much every human right in the Declaration. It's against all of them. That's in my book. I go through the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and what the articles state and how Islam is in conflict with them. That's why it had to create its own Declaration of Human Rights. The Cairo Declaration is because it follows Sharia. So Islam self-defines as a deen, not a religion. And my legislation explains why the threshold is necessary. That's in chapter 10.4. But Islam is a deen, a total system of governance. It incorporates law, politics, economics, military, criminal sanctions, Haddad punishments, gender rules. And it's not a private set of beliefs. It is a competing legal order in the way that we are allowing it to function now. And the charter has never required the state to recognize a parallel legal system as a religion. So the threshold protects the charter. It does not violate it. And this act does not restrict private worship. It doesn't ban mosques. It doesn't prevent prayer or regulate doctrine or affect personal conscience. They can all do exactly what they are doing already. It only restricts how the state recognizes belief system for legal privileges, tax treatment, institutional accommodation, in the same way that we already decide what qualifies as a charity or a political party or a cultural association. So the belief remains free and the legal categories are rational and rights aligned. So yeah, and it conflicts the charter. We have to do this. Our entire society is not only at risk, it will be finished.
But how does that actually stop the Islamization of the West, right? Because if you
Uh-huh.
right, because okay, I get what you're saying, but like
Mm.
because to me, like you're trying to somewhat there's an allowance there, but at the same time, is that really going to
Oh,
it's a
absolutely.
fine line, right? Because it's a double-edged sword, right? Because once you come against, like I said before, I actually think Islam is going to destroy freedom of religion for others. Is
Yeah.
my prediction.
Well,
It's I
how does it do this? It does it because the only reason Islam is advancing like it is because it is being facilitated. I
okay,
mean, we give hundreds of thousands of dollars to establish an Islamic center in the Northwest
okay,
Territories. What in the heck? And the charitable status. So when somebody gives
okay,
their zakat to the National Canadian Council of Muslims, they're also getting a tax receipt for a charitable donation. We are
okay,
financing this, the Islamic finance, all of this stuff, the halal in the schools themselves, what we're
okay.
teaching,
I got you.
all of this collapses. It
Yeah,
collapses
you
when we
want the
do this
government, yeah,
because
to
it doesn't have
stop.
legal status anymore.
Okay, yeah, okay, I got
All
you.
of
Okay,
these
that
court cases,
yeah.
these demands in the workplace, They fall flat. They have no case anymore.
Okay.
And
It's
there's a fail safe. There's a fail safe. Okay, so there's one other thing I want to mention, and that
yeah,
is
no, for sure.
in 1948, when Israel was first formed or freed, okay, from like the
Yeah.
mandate.
I mean, that's the creation of the modern state of Israel. Yeah.
Yeah, the modern state of Israel. When that first happened, they were immediately attacked by the Islam League. Okay, I think there were five
Yeah.
countries attacked them, and those countries told the Muslims to leave. Okay, these are adhering Muslims to leave because they wanted to annihilate the Jews. The purpose was to annihilate the Jews. Those are the people that are in Gaza now, right?
Yeah.
Now, who should
Yeah.
be supporting them? Why are we supporting them? Tell me. Those Arab League, that's who should be supporting them. They're the ones that told them to leave to start with. And they left so that the Jews could be killed. Some Muslims did not go. They stayed and fought with Israel. Now, in most countries, certainly in the West, that division has never taken place. We have a mixed bag. So Israel quite likely does have a feeling that there's terrorists out there and there's nice Muslims here, because they did actually separate themselves back in 1948.
Hmm.
That hasn't happened here. But
It's a good point.
yeah,
Yeah.
but Islam itself allows for that. And I'm going to read it to you. This is at the end of the book. In practical terms, Muslims who regard the full implementation of Sharia, including its stated doctrinal objective of global submission to Islam, as a binding religious duty, okay, those are the puppeteers. Those are
Yeah.
the guys sitting in Qatar, all right, building mosques. So, including its stated doctrinal objective of global submission to Islam as a binding religious duty, and who find themselves unable to fulfill this duty within a non-Islamic legal framework, are doctrinally instructed to emigrate. So if they cannot Islamize the country anymore, the
Yeah.
doctrine
I know.
itself tells them they have to leave. And that's Quran
That's good. Well done.
497.
Well
Yeah.
done, Elaine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Quran
That's,
497
yeah.
rebukes those who remain in lands where they cannot implement Islam.
Mm.
And this constitutes a doctrinal exit clause for committed adherents. They are supposed to leave. And what the Quran actually says, indeed, those whom the angels take in death, so when you die, while wronging themselves, meaning living a Western lifestyle and not trying to make it Islamic, okay, that's wronging yourself, all right? So when the angels take these people who are wronging themselves, the angels will say, in what condition were you? They will say, we were oppressed in the land. And the angels will say, was not the earth of Allah spacious enough for you to
Yeah.
emigrate?
Yeah. To go back. And
Go back.
yeah, what I love about
That's
what
what
you've
they're
done,
supposed to do.
that's a peaceful, you have a legal, peaceful proposal, right? Like to governing officials that actually could work. And
Well, and it's fair to everyone, and it's fair to the Muslims as
yeah,
well,
you
because
know,
they don't all want to get involved in this.
I mean, yeah, well done. It's very interesting, very unique. I don't think anyone's done quite
I
what
don't think
you've
so
done.
either. That's why
Well,
I
they
would just
probably
love to
haven't.
get
Yeah,
more
I
of an
mean, it's
opportunity to share it,
yeah.
you
I
know.
mean, I hope some of the I just gonna talk the higher level influencers for sure would speak with you and get your message out there. I think that's really important. I think you've really got something that can work. That
Absolutely, absolutely
yeah,
it can. We're
yeah,
already doing it. We just need to
yeah,
apply it to beliefs, because I will tell you, no other
yeah,
belief system needs to worry. There isn't any other
yeah,
one that is
yeah.
breaking
I
the
hear you.
Charter and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. They all signed on to the UDHR. They all signed on. It's only Islam that did not, and there's a reason for that, and we need to stop
Well,
it.
and you bring up that's an excellent point too. I mean, the fact that you've done something very unique. Yeah, and yeah, my hope and prayer, right, is yeah, like the people in power will take a listen to what you're proposing. I think it's important, and I think it can turn the tide. And you've given them the tools. It's pretty well done, and
Yeah,
all they have to do is
honestly, it
just
is. And
well, they got
when a
yeah,
politician wants something, they just go in there and say, make it happen.
yeah.
And,
Well, you've done that, right? So
right.
you've
Yes,
done the work.
let's make it happen.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks a lot, Elaine. I really appreciate your time. I mean, pretty well covered everything. I mean,
I think we
yeah,
hit most of the fine
we
points.
did.
Yeah.
You know, there was Dawa. Dawa is just Islamic proselytization, right? It's
I'll look
just,
at the list later and see what we missed. But
yeah,
read the book,
it's,
people. Read the book.
yeah,
Here, let me
yeah,
just one
exactly.
more time.
And
Okay, here we go. This is the book, A
yes,
Civilizational Reckoning. You have my name. It's Elaine Ellinger. And you can find me on Amazon. And this is the French. All right. So it's being published in French, and that's at the request of a woman in Belgium.
nice.
And it's being produced in 3 volumes to facilitate an earlier release because, frankly, Belgium is quite desperate. She was on a tram going into Brussels, and she was the only woman on the tram not in a hijab, and one of them kicked her. And this is life for Coptic Christians in Egypt as well. I have a dear friend who's a Cop there. Actually, I know several Cops from Egypt, and their life is made miserable because they're a minority. You know, they're poked with pins and elbowed, and because they're dirt. Because that is how the doctrine describes the non-Muslim as, less than human.
Yeah, no, for sure. And again, Elaine, like, I give you credit because you've actually countered the Islamization. I'm going to say on the flip side, using like a legal way of getting it out. They
Well,
didn't come in.
I'll say one more thing right now for those poor women in Afghanistan, because
Yeah.
these organizations, with all of that money that they have and all of the power that the OIC has, what did they do for those women? And I know some of them, women from Afghanistan, have written to these organizations. I know that for a fact. Their letters are unanswered, just like my letters to politicians are unanswered. They give them no help. They go on about Islamophobia. They're fighting to get
Oh,
Sharia into the workplace,
yeah.
into the government, into any place they can get it. And they do absolutely nothing for these poor women in Afghanistan. And that is their future if they don't wake up.
God, open up their ears. That's my prayer. And thanks, Elaine. And again, people can find you on X. You're on LinkedIn. So, and of course, you got your own website, Substack too, right? So I'll post all the links. And thanks a lot for your
Oh,
time,
that's so
Elaine.
good of you. Thank you
Well,
so
of
much,
course, yeah,
Tom.
of course, yeah.
Lovely to
So,
talk to you again. A
yeah, take care,
pleasure as
Elaine.
always.
Oh,
Okay.
well, thank you. Yeah, no, I really appreciate your work, and I'll do my part in getting the word out for you.
Thank you so much, Tom.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Bye now.